Okay, everybody, we're going to start with our fireside chat. I'm thrilled to have these three people up on stage. First of all, we had a replacement. Blake Sabatinelli, CEO of Newsy, is trapped in Cincinnati Airport. Apparently, there's been some bad storms out there. I've been checking the news. But Newsy is here, so they can probably fill us in on that. And we had Tom from the Weather Channel. So, Tom, what's the weather report? Crazy out there, parts of the country? Okay. So we're missing a couple speakers today, but we had some great fill-ins. So, and I also have Hannah Brown from, actually, you know what? You guys introduce yourselves. So I already started stealing your thunder, Stephen. Go ahead.
Sure. Stephen Strong, I lead strategic partnerships at Newsy.
Hannah Brown, Chief Strategy Officer at fuboTV.
Harold Morgenstern, Head of National Sales, PlutoTV.
Okay, and so we're here to talk about live, okay? And live is loaded, it's a loaded term, means a lot of different things. We're not just talking about live streaming, we're talking about the integration or the augmentation of live to the overall viewing experience, okay? And we're gonna talk about social TV as well. So, you know, we know that people multitask when they watch content. You know, they're online, they're chatting with their friends, they might be on social, they may be getting snacks of video that are then leading them to discover new content through traditional channels. So it's kind of a broad conversation. So we brought three sort of experts here, kind of from the entertainment space, from sort of sports, and then kind of evolving beyond that. Obviously, live is a big part of that, and obviously news is always a sort of very time-sensitive thing. So again, I want to start with some broad questions, and then we'll kind of see where the conversation goes, if you guys are okay with that. The first question is, and this is something we've been talking about all morning, in a world of many content options, time shifting, binge watching, what is it about live content that still draws in huge numbers of viewers? And we think about the World Cup, and we think about Super Bowl, huge numbers there. I think there was a match in India that broke the record for number of simultaneous eyeballs. What is it about live? Hannah, why don't you start?
Nothing like cricket in India to draw in hundreds of millions of eyeballs. Look, I think that the concept of sport and the synonymous requirement of sport to be live, and I think sport is a thing and it's here to stay, and therefore I don't see live going away anytime soon. But that said, I'm a slightly glib comment, but when you look at the Fubo platform, we are delivering live linear channels. That's the kind of heartbeat of our business. We do obviously have VOD and the ability to DVR content, but 90% of our content consumption is on a live basis. And sport has been a huge part of all pay. It is not a new thing that sport has been a huge part of the adoption of pay TV. Clearly, the US, the prevalence of pay TV in pretty much every US household, but when you look globally, sport has been used by pay TV to acquire customers, and it isn't a new concept. When you look at Fubo, we launched 4 years ago. We're wholly delivered via the internet, but we are absolutely in the pay TV space at $55 a month. And whilst sport is absolutely a kind of key content, is a key, is key content for us in terms of customer acquisition. I think what we've seen really interestingly over the last year is we've broadened our content proposition, but also done a lot of work around the discoverability and the usability of the platform, is that now suddenly over 12 months, we've seen content consumption not only rise by kind of threefold from kind of 30 hours to north of 80, 85 hours a month, but 40% of that viewing is in live sport. Another 40% is on live entertainment channels, and another 20% is on live news channels, when 90% of our content consumption is live. And so, for us, that's actually like a phenomenal bit of information, and that we see that, the customers and the whole household, value that live experience. And, we talk a lot around our price point and our responsibility as a platform to deliver a really robust experience. And there is no way that that trend would have happened if people were having a very poor live TV experience and saying, do you know what, the buffering and the quality and the delay is something that we just can't live with. From a platform perspective, that's just really healthy around customer retention and value from the family. So, people might watch 2 or 3 big sports events a week, but they're also coming back every day for live news or family entertainment.
So, Andrew, did you hear that $55 a month? It's over 15. And I love the story for fuboTV because, you started sort of as, Spanish-speaking millennial soccer fans and now have evolved to a full virtual MVPD.
Right. I mean, we were $10, 2.5, 3 years ago, we were a $10 product focused on soccer. And now we're full pay TV option. If people want to take their pay TV via the internet rather than via cable or satellite.
So once again, that theme of evolution, I love that. And Stephen?
Live for us has been really important. So 18 months ago, we were producing 0 hours of live content a day. We were doing quick snippets and publishing them, and now we're doing 14 hours of live coverage a day. It's been interesting where the content doesn't necessarily look different when we look at our analytics in terms of consumption is actually a high uplift when the content is live. 2 reasons around live. We can activate our user base. We can say, hey, we're talking about this conversation now, be part of the conversation. And 2, it just has a better flow. So, news inherently, there's an important element of it being live. People want to know what's going on now, and how do we leverage that and bring people part of the conversation?
It seems like live has a premium to it, too. I mean, you look at the price point for fuboTV, and there's something about it that draws in huge numbers and makes people a little bit less price sensitive. We're talking about certain forms of content like sports where people are fans, and we all know fans are willing to spend some money. But it also can augment your sort of traditional, more linear entertainment package. And Harold, maybe we can talk a little bit about that. How do you weave sort of, the understanding of live video into an overall entertainment package?
Pluto's very unique because, for all intents and purposes, we are a live viewing experience. We do have some live, great, long-form content partners, like the Cheddars, CBS News, and so forth that are live streaming. But we really have built out a lot more live in terms of sports and news. Big Sky Conference we've built in. But for our perspective, we're seeing huge numbers with live viewing experience. 90% of the viewers actually come to Pluto for a live experience, but it's not the actual live simulcast. So they're getting that perspective of a live experience for them. It's personalized. So we've weaved in, a lot of content, some that is live, but then the overall experience is that live experience.
So almost the opposite of what Fubo's doing, right? Where you guys started with sort of live sports and then bolted on this full virtual, MVPD entertainment package. Where you guys have started with, if you go to Pluto, you've got the grid there. How many channels do you guys have now?
100 plus, probably about 125. But most excitingly, with the recent acquisition of Viacom, 14 additional channels from Viacom with the best of content in the library. Mm-hmm. So it's growing every day. There's actually so many content providers around the world that want to get onto the platform. It's probably one of the areas we need to build up and continue to grow.
Yeah. It's interesting you say they're very different because actually, from a consumer perspective, they're very similar. You get home, you switch on the TV, you used to switch on your set-top box, you now switch on your connected TV device, you make a choice about what you want to watch. And it might be that you're really wanting to get access to live news, and therefore you might go to Newsy, or you might go to CNN, or you might really want to watch a live game. Or it's that, because Pluto's in the free space, or largely in the free space, is that, customers that don't take a pay TV package, or potentially when they switch on their TV, Pluto, because of the relationships they have with some of the hardware manufacturers, that's the first kind of EPG that they come to. But in terms of customer viewing behavior, of getting in, sitting down and watching TV, it's actually a very similar thing, albeit the way that we market to our customers because of our different content propositions might differ. But as I say, as a consumer, and you go home, you switch on your CTV device, you're going to probably make 1 or 2 or 3 decisions around maybe the 2 or 3 paid products you take and also the free platforms that you engage with.
And that's really the benefit that we've seen. It's more of that lean-back experience as a complement to pay TV. So the viewers, there's, I'm sure we'll get into fatigue and so forth, but there's so many options out there. But what we've seen is that the viewers, are going through, I don't really know what I want to watch. And they'll sit there, they'll go through Pluto, they'll start watching channel to channel, some things they're familiar with, some things they've never seen before. And then engagement is sessions are, 200 plus minutes out of a time that people are watching. So it's really been a great complement with, some of the SVOD services and being one of the biggest AVODs out there.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of research and discussion about sort of lean forward, where you're actually choosing content, and then sort of lean back, it's in the background type of thing. I fall asleep watching golf matches, but I love watching golf still, right? Like playing it too. Let's talk a little bit about that. How is live video, live TV content, how does it change when you put it on over the top? How does that change from traditional broadcast and cable satellite options? Are there real differences there, and are those differences positives, negatives, and if they're positives, are they sustainable over time? Stephen, maybe you can start with that.
Yeah, for us, we play in both spaces. We have a 24/7 cable network. We syndicate to Comcast and Spectrum and traditional folks, and then we have a linear stream we give to folks like Fubo, and a different stream we give to folks like Pluto. So I think from a delivery standpoint, internet delivery is a lot more efficient and less expensive, which we like to leverage where we can. And also there's some benefits on the tech side. We can do interactive overlays based on audience and things that we can't really do across our full traditional linear footprint at this point.
Okay. Hannah?
Look, I kind of concur with that. The reason why these virtual operators like Fubo, and there are obviously others out there in the market, have been able to change the price point is the kind of cost to deliver these new businesses rather than with legacy infrastructure has clearly been, is pretty significant. That said, I think what is really remarkable is that we launched 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, and when you look at consumption patterns, 85% of our viewing is happening on a big screen at home. 90% of our viewing is happening in a live environment. That is not that different to what you see from traditional operators. And I come from a long background in the UK with Sky. And when I look at the device graph of how people consume fuboTV, it is exactly the same as the device graph of how people consume Sky. They wake up in the morning, they put the TV on, they might watch half an hour of news while they get ready. They then get in the car or they get on the train. They're on the train, they might be looking at their mobile device, thinking about what they might plan. They might have downloaded some VOD. At work during the day, if they're a Barcelona fan, they might watch a Champions League game here in the US, on their computer. Then on the way home, a bit more mobile. And then in the evening, when they get home, back to the big screen, which is where the majority of the content consumption is coming from. And I think for content owners and rights holders, that is a pretty reassuring thing. That there has been understandably a big concern around fragmentation of audience, reduction in volume of hours of content viewing. But I think that seeing around premium content and also the at-home or in-home experience around people wanting to use the biggest and best available screen to watch their content is as relevant now as it was 5 or 10 years ago.
So here's an interesting question. Is it because it's live or is it because it's the type of content? So like if you're watching, the World Cup, you're going to want that on the biggest screen available.
But if you're watching Game of Thrones, I'm assuming everyone, when they're watching Game of Thrones, are doing it at home with their families on the big screen. I'm not saying that if you're traveling and you download onto your iPad or your phone, you would watch it there, but I think ask anyone in this room where they'd rather watch Game of Thrones or Shark Tank with their family is still at home on the sofa with a cup of tea or a glass of wine and their dinner. And in that collective environment, people still live with families in their homes. It doesn't mean that, clearly people that live on their own or they travel a lot or they're younger and their consumption pattern changes, but fundamentally people grow up and, they share a house with their partner or their families and they watch TV together.
And I certainly would concur with Hannah on the research around the OTT. I mean, we see 85 to 90% of our viewership also taking place on the big screen in the TV. It's why one of the biggest objectives for us is to move into the sets, into the OEM strategies, and be partners with the Vizios and the Samsungs of the world. So when you turn on your set, the first thing you're going to see up there is the Pluto TV app, and you're going right in. We see from the cost effectiveness. We think we have one of the best offerings in the market. You really can't get better than free. So we put that out there for the
Turners would agree with that, by the way.
Yeah. I think you touched on a really important point, and we're doing a lot of work on that, is how we work with the various hardware providers or their software partners that are on those pieces of hardware to deliver that, TV first experience rather than app first experience. So you switch on the TV, you're directly back onto the last channel that you're watching, how we work with favoriting channels and surfacing content such that we can help people navigate through the, huge plethora of content choices they have to find what they want to watch more easily. Because the quicker someone finds what they want to watch on Pluto, or the quicker they find what they want to watch on Fubo, the better, the better experience, but they then translate to being, a better customer who value the service.
So there's some research out there that says we've crossed the inflection point where I think 50% plus of content is now viewed on mobile devices, which is a small screen. And I want to explore a little bit further. Is it live or is it the type of content? Newsy, is news, do you need to see that on a giant screen? Are your sort of viewing sort of statistics different in terms of the type of screen?
Yeah, so in terms of us, what other folks have said, about 92% of our viewership is on big screens, and then 96% of our viewership is lean back. So when you come to an app, even if it's not live programming, it's linear-like. So I think there is sort of content fatigue, and there's too much content, and there's 5,000 apps on Roku, and how do you break through that and get people into what they want to see and allow them to skip around? But yeah, mobile for us is a big acquisition channel, because a lot of our content is 60-second, 2-minute bites. You don't need to watch it on the big screen, but then we produce 2-hour beautiful documentaries. So again, given revenue and viewership trades, the big screen is a holy grail. So whether it's mobile or social, we certainly want people to view content and sample there, but we view that all as a funnel to get people ideally watching content on the large screen in the living room.
Okay, so perfect segue. You said it first, social. Next question, how should live video and social media work together? Are they mostly complementary or competitive for viewers' attention? Who wants to take that first?
I'll jump in. I think it's really sort of complementary. I think a really good example is in the last presidential election, obviously there are caucuses, all sorts of things that go on. And while we had live coverage on the channel, we were on the ground with a lot of candidates and had a really interesting opportunity to go live on Facebook for 2 hours and walk people through what a caucus is. I didn't know. It was interesting. So doing that all is complementary, have a dialogue with the anchors and people and bring them awareness to Newsy and ideally get them into the funnel. So it's been a great complementary tool for us.
Hannah?
Sorry,
go ahead, Harold.
And I think it's really about following what the consumer wants. They're sitting back, they're watching TV, they're on their iPad, they're on their phone. The social aspect, from Viacom, they have Who Say, so you have that social influencer coming in while you're watching the show. You're also communicating back and forth. That's a whole big aspect of the viewing experience. And, we see, co-viewing, growing every day now through the roof on different devices, and the communication going and communicating between friends and tune in, and water cooler is no more in the office. It's really, instantaneous gratification on Twitter and so forth, and you're putting out that tweet and reaching your friends, or you're watching this. So I think social is only going to continue to grow while people are watching all this great content.
Yeah, and we already know the link between content discovery and social. I can't tell you the number of people on Facebook, and they were tweeting me when Tiger is making, a drive on the back nine, right? And suddenly you got to watch this, you got to turn the TV, which I did. So did you want to weigh in then as well?
Well, I think when it comes to live sport in particular, the protection around rights, the cost of rights, and the distribution of those rights, and sport is clearly distributed on a in the US even on a state by state level when you're looking at the regional sports networks, but on a global level, the idea that Premier League clips or NFL clips could have occur in a free space and be distributed, especially by people that are licensed partners, is something that is to be taken pretty seriously. And I think it's well documented the focus by broadcasters and governing bodies around piracy and control over rights. So kind of with that overall framework in mind, the leak of kind of premium rights into the free social space is something that has to be monitored pretty carefully. That said, as you say, the social space is a great acquisition tool around awareness of what's going on, the provision of additional content or supporting content around sports news and influencer conversations, etc., is only a good thing. And I was chatting to some ex-colleagues that run the La Liga business here in North America, and they're doing stuff around what they can do with cameras, picking up the pre-game activity around La Liga matches and putting that onto social, and then call to actions about where people can watch the full game. So I think we're at least 5-8 years into pretty sophisticated behaviors around using social to drive upsell to premium experiences.
So one of the big questions is, and I'll just throw this out there, because we've had a lot of these large events. I mentioned the World Cup, the Super Bowl, NBA Finals. Millions and millions of people watch their content over the top. Do you feel the technical challenges for live video are largely solved, or do there remain major stumbling blocks to full viewer engagement and satisfaction? So sort of put your business hat on. You don't have to be a technologist here to answer that question.
I think there's two things. I mean, I consume content on a number of virtual MVPDs. You still have a lot of lag when you're changing channels, and still, if there's an event with high capacity, there's buffering issues. I mean, I think there's an interesting business case, and we'll get there eventually. When you watch a lot of major network television on virtual MVPDs, a lot of the commercials aren't actually cleared for digital. So you have this sort of like slate, which is this massive sort of lost opportunity during ad breaks. I feel like it's getting there. There are gaps, and it's getting better.
Look, I mean, I'm not our CTO, and I think he spends an awful lot of time worrying about this stuff. That said, I think the market has come an awful long way in the last 2 or 3 years. And the other thing about subspace businesses is you do know how many people you're going to get watching your content. It's not going to be a surprise that suddenly, 100 million people in India tuning into your service. We don't have rights there. We're not distributed there, right? And we know how many subs we've got and how many free trials we've got on the platform. And therefore, we can do a pretty decent job of planning the load requirements that we need to build for. And, I think if you'd asked this question 2 or 3 years ago, there was some pretty major problems around some pretty major events across the board. At Fubo, we've been pretty proud of our history of doing that very reliably. And I think it kind of comes back to the first point. If you're going to charge people $55 for a service where they're tuning in to watch an irreplaceable match because they're a fan of a team, then you're in a bad spot if that's not working in a seamless environment. And I think that the market understands that streaming products, do lag a little bit behind their satellite and cable counterparts. But I think the most important thing is that the video quality is good. And, we've done that with 4K or whatever. And, we are one of 4 or 5 players in the market that take this pretty seriously. So, yes, scale is a challenge, but I think it's a challenge that we understand and we can plan for because we've got a good idea of the number of people that will come to a particular event at a particular time.
Yeah, and we've really reached massive scale. I mean, 3 years ago, we were in this room. We had a whole conversation around will OTT break the internet, right? And I think we're past that point. Hopefully now. We still have some degradation of service issues in terms of user satisfaction. We have a few minutes for questions, and I just asked Donna if you can see if we have a couple who are back there. Oh, table 5 has been waiting patiently. Name, company, and question, please.
Hi, Barbara Bellafiore from Bell Communications, and thanks. This was a great panel. Just to that question about 3 years ago, could OTT break the internet? Can you give me your observations of actual distribution? I mean, thanks to the cable industry, that's where most people are getting their broadband and OTT, but many are also watching via their telephones on the go. What's your observation of video transmission when it's not through the cable broadband wire?
Well, I mean, look, I think very simply, when we look at content consumption, pretty much all of the content consumption is happening when people are at home connected to their cable internet service. So in terms of the impact of 5G, people making potentially independent home internet choices, there is content consumption when people are out on the road. We see that at kind of, anything between 10 and 15% of our content consumption. I think that we all as consumers know that when we're on the road, there is a chance that if we're trying to watch live video, there's a chance that might not work so well if we're in a high density area or we're out of network. But in terms of most of our content consumption, I think I probably speak for the other two up here with me today, is that because most of that's happening at home, they're taking their in-home internet service, which is reliable.
So it sounds like you also believe that consumers sort of know expectations about where they are, what device they're on, if they're on the road, and they can kind of set their expectations appropriately based on.
I think that for all of us, the market has matured a huge amount in the last 3 or 4 years, but let's be in no doubt that it's got a long, long way still to mature. It'd be interesting to see, what Harold says around his content consumption. But we started off very strong in soccer. We have a a percent of our base which is soccer and Hispanic, in particular because of their interest. But the next big group of our users tend to be 5 or 6 people in the home, an older teenager that is acting as an educator in the household around consumption of how they access these services and use them, and then being a viable alternative. Is that end state? I mean, I just don't think we're anywhere close to end state in terms of broad adoption in the United States, and the likes of my parents thinking that they might want to take this sort of service. So, I think there's still an awful long way to go.
And I would just add, from Pluto's perspective, for content distribution and consumption, we're pretty much on every single device that's out there in the marketplace. But you got to go beyond and think about, 2 to 3 years, as scary as it will become, autonomous vehicles. Every vehicle has a built-in car screen. Do you see Pluto being streamed in Wi-Fi while the car is driving and you're watching content that's free? When you're in the plane, more and more airlines now are starting to move towards offering free Wi-Fi. The Hulu and Netflix, the bandwidth is heavy. Does Pluto have the ability to be in there and be streamed and be able to watch content that way? So those are some of the new ways that we're thinking about down the road of where we can be distributing this content and be consumed.
So a lot more endpoints out there to serve content to, a lot more different types of consumers. There's a gentleman back at table 20 that's been waiting patiently there. That'll be our last question for this chat. Table 20? Oh, sorry. Table 19? Yes, sir.
Sorry, Ted with Culigent. I was just curious about what are your thoughts of TVOD working in live, the transactional. For instance, also, we found out that Brian likes golf. I like golf too, but not enough to pay for a subscription specific to that. But I am for baseball. So I have a subscription to Major League Baseball app, and I have my favorite teams and those kind of things. And even when it comes to live news like Fox, CNN, I wouldn't pay for them 24/7, 365 days a year. But when it comes to an election, they're pretty entertaining. So what are your thoughts on TVOD?
From a content perspective, it's really interesting having a additional stream of revenue. So to your point, where people traditionally don't have a petulance to pay for news, we're looking at a few things. Is with our cable agreements, there's some content we're restricted from giving away for free. So how do we allow consumers to access that for a nominal fee? So part of that is a standard monthly transaction fee, but then it is looking at some vendors to say, hey, I want to watch an hour of Newsy content. How do I pay 13 cents? How do I pay a fee for individual content? So I think looking at a number of different models, because there's a lot of subscription services. How do you be competitive and provide someone different without them having to commit to paying some sort of monthly fee?
It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, especially when it comes to live sport, the rights and the content owner has a huge amount of say in how that happens. And when you distributing your content through third-party content channels, there's a lot of inflexibility there, and I don't think you can underestimate the size and scale of those rights agreements. You can look to something like boxing, WWE, which has got a pretty tried and tested pay-per-view model. So clearly, TVOD around sport is a thing, and it will. And I'm absolutely certain it will remain to be so. There's just a constant tension over kind of lifetime value of a customer, what someone is prepared to pay, how you manage that within the overall rights landscape. So I'm sure we'll see those models evolve over time, but fundamentally control of the rights first and foremost is important for you to be able to make those choices.
And I think we have a good model for you now with tons of news, Newsy, CNN, and others, as well as tons of sports, a lot more coming, and it's basically free. So it's no cost at all to the consumer. So.
Well, that's a wrap. Let's thank our wonderful Fireside Chat panelists. Thank you very much.